It's great to have you here and the OANZ webinar, which introduces our submission to the Gene Tech Bill. OANZ has invested a tremendous amount over the last 4 or 5 months, particularly onto this as it became public. And it's great to have a full panel here tonight. We've got Marcus Wilkins, who is a certified organic grower and lawyer, and we'll be introducing Marcus. And everyone will know Scott. Scott's a long-time committed member of the organic community, serving on the BioGrow board. He's a grower, well-known grower and leader in the Hawke's Bay, and he sits on the OANZ board. And it's a great pleasure also to have Mai Chen with us tonight, a public law specialist. Now, before we really hook into this, just a few rules and guidelines for today. The idea is to have this quite openly communicative. There's going to be sort of the first 20, 30 minutes where a lot of information will be exchanged, but there's 2 places you can submit your thoughts. The first and foremost is the Q&A. That's at the bottom of the panel here. You'll see a Q&A sign with a question mark. Those are for questions that you've got of the panel, whether that's Scott, Mai, or Marcus. And what we'd like you to do also is write the question and then perhaps who you'd like that directed to. That's really important. And then also you'll see that there's a chat. Now the chat's for a place for you to put comments. Perhaps you also want to put a link to something important, a press release or a piece of information you think everyone can share. And then that'll enable us to be able to move that on from there. So we're really looking forward to the next hour. I'm going to stop talking. It's a great pleasure to introduce you to Scott Lawson, and Scott's going to set the scene and he's going to describe to us what OANZ has been up to from a board perspective. Please, Scott.
Good afternoon, everybody. And on behalf of the OANZ board, we welcome you today. Thank you for taking your time out to either watch us live now or in recording later on. So apologies from Rob Simsick, who our chair is currently away overseas, and he's further looking at industry issues in North America at the moment. So he'll come home fully up to speed as well too. And apologies from Tiffany Tompkins, who is actually on her way to the US today, so for a trade fair. So and on behalf of our council as well too, OANZ is structured in such a way that we have a board of directors effectively, and then we have council and the members, and they feed up to the board. So it's from a ground base up to the board, not from a top-down approach. And we represent our members and our council members at board level. So, and with the time period and constraints we've been under, I do apologise if not everybody's up to speed, but I think OANZ has put some really good comms out there, and thank you to Lou, who's with us here today, and thank you to Brendan as a spokesperson as well too, who's operating all the hard work together with Tiffany Tompkins hand in hand. And thank you to Marcus for joining us as a grower and his legal expertise. And through all the public goodwill and the fundraising, we've managed to engage legal counsel in the way of Mai Chen, who's joining us today as well too. So thank you to everybody for digging in the hard graft and supporting OANZ. For those of us that we have actually taken the lead on this, I would have to say, from what is an industry group that is just under $1 billion worth of turnover, we're having a big voice. And we've always said that for a small industry, we have a large voice, and we're definitely shouting from the rooftops about the unfairness and the impact, particularly on our certified organic industry and exports and food production, but also our GMO friends, our growers, which by status quo at the moment is the rest of New Zealand is GMO free. So we are holding hands together with our conventional growing counterparts, and those of you who may be introduced just recently to the organic industry, we cover every segment of traditional food and fibre as well too. So we're really a duplication of everything in the conventional world. We just do things under a certified organic regime for our trade and then exports there. And we've currently got 3 main work streams on the go at the moment, one being this GE bill. This was a bit of a bombshell to us, although National campaigned on it back in when they were elected, saying that they wanted to release the the blanket on the GE regulations. We didn't believe they'd ever go as far as being more liberal than the USA, which is what they're currently proposing. And obviously, we're pushing back on that at the moment. Our other work streams are very much in the organic products bill, where we are looking for regulation to define the word organic in the New Zealand domestic scene and to set our international market exports, because our customers overseas are saying, so if you're sending a certified organic product, what does that mean to us? And we need to have a strong base on that in our own local market regulations. So we're working hand in hand with MPI on that. That's taken many years of asking for that. And our third work stream is we're looking at we're currently running an SFFF project on our funding model, and to be self-funding. At the moment, we're only funded by membership, of which many of us contribute to, voluntary membership. We're not a levy organisation, so we are hugely constrained by the funds we have. And thank you once again for those that have chipped in to fight this GE fund as well. So we've known that this bill was coming at us for some time, but it really got dropped on us mid to late last year. The organic industry has not been consulted on. We think that was deliberate because they knew we'd come screaming about it. We are now vocal, we're now active, and we're now leading the charge for GMO-free producers in New Zealand on this front. Our first contact with the government and officials was we had a delegation of 4 of us, including Jack Heinemann as well, to Professor Jack. And we went to Wellington in October, and we met with MB officials who blindsided us in lots of ways, saying they explained the total liberalisation and deregulation, and how in MB's exact words were our industry would be loaded with unknown costs of segregation and coexistence. So, and we can't accept that. We're not prepared to be dropped under the bus. So since then, we've had other delegations. We've gone back to Wellington. Tiffany and particularly Brendan have spent a lot of time backwards and forwards together with Professor Jack being our scientific advisor. And Jack works in this around the world as well too, as a genetic scientist. And we've learned a lot from Jack, and we wish to share that as well too. So thank you to everybody's inputs. Some of the funds that we have receipted have gone towards some of our costs, but it goes nowhere towards covering the in-kind that everybody you see today is putting in. So thank you to everybody involved there. And I think I'll leave it at that. There's a lot of work ahead of us, and thank you for everybody chipping in. One thing I'd just like to say is the only way we'll make a real impact on this is our GMO-free conventional growing counterparts who are widely concerned about this. And I was reading today a letter in the latest Rural News this week, or Farms Weekly, sorry, it was this week. And literally it's Nathan Guy, ex-minister, saying take the time to get the GE balance right. Many are considering the use of the new technologies, but they're saying please take the time. And these are groups such as the Meat Industry Association that charge with all the export stuff, Beef and Lamb, Kate Ackland, Dairy NZ, the list goes on and on. And there's some really strong submissions out there from industry saying, please put the brakes on this, stop it, take time, let's think about it. May will allude to it later on what she thinks the government will be heading in that direction, but we're really concerned. The grain and seed industry and their submission online, these are all available to have a look, state very clearly that coexistence is not possible. So MB said to us, we're going to release all these constraints on the new gene tech. You're going to go out there and you as industry are going to self-regulate and figure out your coexistence. And we don't believe that's possible. Yeah. It's backed up by comments in the submissions by grain and seed saying coexistence is not possible. So I think I'll leave it at that. I've said enough. Please feel free to reach out to any of us at any time. We're all here. And yeah, we're just wanting to help and get this across the line. I guess my passing final comment would be with recent discussions with growers feeling like the sky is falling on their head. Yes, it can be overwhelming. Yes, it's daunting what we're up against. But other panelists will hopefully enlighten us that there may be a way out of this, that we can continue to farm and produce certified organic produce for the New Zealand and domestic markets and maintain New Zealand's premium position in the world as a supplier of 40-odd million people with great food. Thank you. Great,
Scott. Thank you very much. It is true we're a passionate bunch, and there's been different levels of discovery, really, of what's happened within this bill. And so it's a great pleasure to introduce to you Marcus, because Marcus is a certified organic grower and he has other primary industry interests as well, but he's also a lawyer with Tompkins, Wake and Tauranga. And Marcus, do you want to just share with us, as a lawyer, how we engaged with you and then what you found? Over here.
Well, actually, I went to OANZ for some help linking up with organic distributors in the US, and TIFF latched on to me, and little did I know that I would be pulled into the extent I was. So I, just a bit of background, I'm offering OANZ services pro bono, so I'm not here wearing my Tompkins Wake hat, but I'm happy to help OANZ and have been involved since anniversary weekend quite extensively. So my background, obviously as a lawyer, it's commercial property law, and I can read a bill, I can understand the law, I know the principles of interpretation, but I'm not a public lawyer, which is why Mai Chen's involved and why her involvement is critical. I mean, I think when she talks to you, you will get an understanding and appreciation of her particular skill set and how vital that is in what OANZ is trying to do. So I'm a sort of fifth generation on the land. My brother's the farmer. He's farmed in Australia for 23 years. He's farmed in the US through syndicates. My family's got interests through direct family members in forestry, dairy, Kiwifruit, myself, and sheep and beef. So it's fair to say I've got a strong connection with the land and understand what brand New Zealand's about and how our status as a country and the messages we've been giving markets for years and years and years is vital and gives us a point of differentiation. So we've got a Kiwifruit orchard, we've got conventional, and we've moved into organics. Our particular property runs down into a stream which feeds into the Little Waihi estuary off the coast at Makatu. That's, I'm told, one of the 5 top most polluted estuaries in New Zealand. That's chemical, herbicide, synthetic fertilizer runoff over many years. So I used to get cockles there with my grandmother. You can't do that anymore. So a few years ago, we embarked on a process of restoring some wetlands, and so we got into the organics journey that way. So I'm reasonably emotionally invested, but I try not to get emotional. When I looked at the bill, the first thing that struck me about the bill was the extent to which the minister, a single minister and a single regulator, would be able to influence the direction in the future. And this is in particular with the minister being able to pass regulations after Parliament's enacted the legislation, which could dramatically change definitions as to what is a GMO and what is a gene technology. And so we did a bit of an analysis of the bill over anniversary weekend. We gave May 50 pages. She threw her hands in the air in horror and said, let's narrow down to what the key issues are that are important for the organics and non-GMO sector. And so we've worked on those changes, principally May, as to what sorts of things could we do with the bill, given the fact that it is clearly in the process, the train's left the station and the legislation will pass in some shape or form. So that's a nutshell about my sort of background, overview of concerns at the nature of the bill. I'm happy to hand back to you, Brendan, and perhaps you introduce Mai to talk about what she's been doing.
Yeah, kia ora, Marcus. Thank you for that. It's been a mutual sort of shock discovery, really, where the bill's landed. It's been a good question. I'll just cover off now. And it's quite a good segue across to Mai, because why didn't we believe National? It's not that no one believed National that they were going to do something, but to give you some context, OANZ went to Mai Chen, it was 2010, for some guidance on how we would approach getting organic regulated. And Mai sort of set us off a chart of how to climb a mountain, and there's a direct route and all sorts of meandering ways you can go about it. So from 2010 until we complete will be about 17 years. The shock and horror of us with this is that we're going to go from a bill to an act with the regulation and a regulator within a year. And so this is why there was no sense that we could do this ourselves. There was a sense of real urgency, not just for us, but for the whole sector, and this unusualness. And it's a great chance to hand over to Mai. Mai, thank you very much. Mai's going to take us right through out the process that she's taken us on. And over to you, Mai. Thank you.
Good. Thank you so much. And can I just thank the team, Scott, and to Brendan and to Marcus. Tiffany isn't here. But to say to you, I am here as a resource to help you. You're probably wondering whether all the hype about the bill is true. I'm afraid it is. And really, Mai, is this really going to go through? Well, this government has a track record. They have changed the face of MMP. You need to understand that prior to this, we really had MMP, which kind of stopped the fastest law in the West, because you now had more parties in Parliament. But of course, what happened in November of 2023 is that policymaking in this country fundamentally changed. Policymaking used to be a process that was undertaken in consultation. But what happened in November of 2023 is that the parties entered into agreements with each other and said, this isn't just confidence in supply. We are in government together because these are the things that we are going to do. So they then set out 40, 50, 100, whatever commitments there were, including the fact that they would review the situation concerning GMOs and gene technologies. The result of that is that the policy was made in the coalition agreement. And now all they're doing is they're implementing it. That's what they're doing. And so when people say to me, no, Mai, we want to stop the bill, I just say, that's lovely. But you are 3 years too late, because, of course, you would have had to get to the parties before they devised their manifestos, before they went to the election, won their respective however many seats, and then got together and negotiated and publicised the signed coalition agreements. So many of you are saying, well, what does that mean? What's the bill like? Look, it's so complicated that you would need to put a wet tea towel around your head and then spend 5 years trying to get through law school. So the short version is this. The bill is defective. The reason is because the people who advised on drafting it are not the people who are experts in this field. It should really have been the Ministry for the Environment, and it should really have been an amendment to the HASNO Act, which you are familiar with. But the difficulty here is that it has to do with the strength of the ministers involved. The Minister for Science and Gene Technology is much more senior than the Minister for the Environment, and because they felt that HASNO had been too precautionary and the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, had been too precautionary, they decided to start again. Now, the difficulty with starting again is that that's okay if you've got a 4-year term of government or a 5-year term of government. But the difficulty with a 3-year term of government, particularly when you're starting from a standing start because you are a new government coming in, is that you have about 18 months, maybe 20 months of activity, because by around about this time next year, They'll all be out campaigning. Parliament will actually rise in August of next year, and then, lucky us, we're going to be enjoying TV advertising of political parties, and we're going to be back into the throes of elections. This government's made it absolutely clear they're going to push this bill through. So when OANZ came to me, the difficulty is that this bill amends 10 other pieces of legislation, but it doesn't do it well. And the reason is because, look, I'm sure the officials at MB are well-meaning, and I can't believe that MB's been given something else to do. You need to understand that MBIE has every minister. They are servicing regulators. They have far too much to do. But the result of that has been gaps where there's no regulation. So let me give you an example, as opposed to miring you in law. May, if we'd wanted to be lawyers, we would have gone to law school. So let me give you an example. This example is very real because it's generally how you come to think about legislation. Something escapes. It damages a whole pile of crops. It hurts people. It undermines your organic certification. And as a consequence of that, your exports are rejected. And then the cry goes up, where the hell is this thing coming from? Okay, have you contained it? And who's going to pay the compensation? Now, the difficulty with the current legislation is that not all of the GMOs and not all of the gene technologies in the bill are covered by HASNO and covered by the liability provisions in HASNO. Also, there are no traceability requirements that extend to non-food elements of genetically modified organisms or technology or techniques. So that means that when the proverbial hits the fan, we won't know where it came from. We won't know how to contain it because we don't know where it came from. And you won't be able to get compensation unless you decide that you want to pay a hotshot lawyer to go to court and argue Rylands and Fletcher and tort. Now, what is Rylands and Fletcher and what's tort? Is that tort as in T-A-U-G-H-T? No, that's tort as in T-O-R-T. And you will need a lot of scientific expert evidence. It will be expensive. It will be difficult. If I was the bastard who actually created the GMO or the technique, I'd just say, well, it didn't come from us. Show us, prove it. It's your burden of proof. You have to show causation. I mean, it will be difficult and expensive. So what I have tried to do, and forgive me, because I know that what I have worked hard to try and get a government amendment paper to fix as the bill goes through the House. There are lots of stages, so just trust me when I say that in general, a bill is introduced, then there's first reading, then it gets sent to select committee, then there either are or are not select committee submissions. But you should know that with respect to this government, just about all of the legislation introduced out of the coalition agreements have been put through under urgency. Then there's a report back from select committee, then there is second reading, then there's the committee of the whole House. Now, the committee of the whole House is usually where the government introduces an amendment paper, you know, and then it goes after that. It's third reading, and really, it's really all over bar the shouting. Okay, so what I've done, I know you don't want the bill. I'm sorry, too late. I know that you don't want GMOs and gene technologies released into the environment. Well, sorry, that isn't going to happen either. So the question is, what can we achieve, May? Well, something is better than nothing. And my job is to align your best interests with the politicians' best interests. And essentially, they're going to look ridiculous. If something escapes and they don't know where it came from, they don't know how to contain it because they don't know where it came from, and they can't ping anyone for compensation, in which case you're likely to go to the government and say, look, you're the one who put through defective legislation and you need to help us out. Otherwise, the entire industry is going to go under. So the amendments that I have put forward, which are being considered to put into the government amendment paper, okay, because that's where you want it, it have to do with extending the has no provisions concerning strict liability so they apply to everything that may be unleashed due to the bill, the Gene Technology Bill. Now, that's everything that's regulated, that's everything that's not regulated, because it isn't going to make any difference. I mean, if it escapes and it hurts people, I don't care whether it's regulated or not. I need it to be traceable, because otherwise we will not know where it's coming from. Similarly, with strict liability, user pays, harm principle, it has to apply. If you are creating harm, then we have to be able to recover that. And then, Marcus has talked about the fact that the regulator has a lot of power. But let me tell you, the most unusual thing, well, there's so many unusual things, not intended, I don't think, but just people having to go too fast. You've got the minister who makes decisions as to whether or not you can get an exemption from the bill. So I'm Sue Blogg's multinational. I make GMO X, which is non-fiber. I go to the minister, I say, oh, by the way, Minister, I've given your party a very big campaign donation. And by the way, could I have an exemption from the entire act? So I've simply said that it's like the fast track bill. It just opens the minister up to allegations of corruption. So actually, even though the regulator can still be subject at the moment to policy direction by the minister, it's still better that the regulator does it than the minister does it, all right? And then I guess our final big point has to do with coexistence. And the difficulty is that if you look at the regulatory impact statement, we call them RISs, okay? Normal people say, what are they? They're supposed to be the government having thought through what the pros and cons are and who's bearing the costs. Well, I think as the previous speakers, Scott and Brendan and Marcus have said, the RIS is very clear. You guys are going to bear most of the cost. So most of the benefit will go to the GMO sector and most of the costs will be borne by you. But you can't have a situation where, I'm Marcus Wilkins, the Wilkins family, 5th generation, we've always had farm here. And then, GMO multinational turns up next door and starts planting stuff, which means that I can't possibly keep my organic certification and all my exports are rejected. There have to be some ability for coexistence measures. Otherwise, what the government said, which I have no doubt they really, really, really want to do, which is to grow the economy, will not happen, because they'll be creating one sector while destroying another sector. Now, in my culture, Confucius say that there is no point taking bricks from the west wall to fix the hole in the east wall. And so I think if you're not careful, you'll end up with no greater benefit. You'll destroy a lot of jobs. And the government, we'll end up with another Royal Commission into GMO, actually. But this time, the Royal Commission will be because the ball got dropped. There'll be a big contamination. We won't know where it's from. We can't contain it. And we can't figure out who's liable for it. And when that happens, heads will roll. I'm a troubleshooter, so I spend most of my life with people who are in a lot of trouble. And I have been in rooms with prime ministers who said, right, well, we need a head to roll. Who would you like it to be? So what I'm trying to do is say to them, I know that at the moment, under the RMA, there are local authorities and regional authorities who have coexistence measures in place for their unique circumstances and local economies, including by establishing GMO-free food production zones. So, of course, what the bill says is that all of those aren't valid anymore. And we said, well, first of all, could you delete that provision? And secondly, if you are going to retain that provision, then you need to put in some sort of coexistence measure, because if you don't, then that requires a little old me. I'm on the Wilkins farm. I'm required to go to court and say, you need to get those guys to back off. Now, even backing off isn't going to make much difference, because GMOs fly through the air. They're difficult to contain once they're out. And you know a lot more about this than I do. But all I'm trying to say is that at the moment, I'm trying to call these technical amendments. I don't want to embarrass the government. I know what it is they're trying to achieve. I think it's, I understand why they think that will grow the economy. I'm just trying to ensure that what they intend is actually achieved and nothing else. Now, if we can get other things on the way through, OANZ has done everything possible. Tiffany and Brendan and the amazing Marcus has worked really hard to draft a whole pile of stuff. The only problem is that the bill has already been introduced. And despite the fact that there are 15,000 written submissions, nevertheless, the Health Committee has elected only to have 3 days of oral hearings. So there were 15,000 submissions, 900 people wanted to be heard, 400 people they've actually agreed to hear. And the result of that is that they are just going to push it through so that they do finish oral submissions on the 17th of March, which was the original date. Now, what that tells me is that Sam Uffindale is working very hard to get into Cabinet because he's going to deliver what he's been told to do, which is to get that bill back from oral submissions so that they can start writing the report for the report back and then meet the deadlines. What that tells me is they are planning to get it through this year, and that also comports with all of my soundings from Wellington, which is that very soon work is going to start on the regulations and on the standards. So if you think that you are taking time out of your precious running of your business, all I can tell you is that it's worth doing that. You need to concentrate now, because if you come to me after the bill is enacted and say, I want X changed, it's even harder, okay? Basically, once they've done that tick, they'll move on. They'll just say, no, we're not looking at that, we just put it in. So what are we looking at, May? Well, once they get it in, you'd be lucky to get anything through, maybe even in the next term of government. Mostly what they'll say is, oh, let's wait and see how it works out. Okay, so it is really important to concentrate now, and there's a pile of effort going in, and all I can say is, well, it isn't early enough, but it's better late than never, and it's good that we're there now. So Scott and I are going to turn up next Wednesday. Why are we turning up? Because we'll get double the time, or we will get more time and a lot more engagement if we are kanohi kita kanohi. If we come in remotely, 10 minutes and they'll cut us off. So that's why we're making the effort. And can I say to Scott, poor old Scott, who's got his livelihood, his business to run, you know, this is hard for everybody. And for Marcus, who worked through weekends and nights because I was trying to constrain my time. So I'd say, oh, I just need you to do 15 things. And could you get it done for me by X? So, you know, I'm grateful for all of the team, and you should be too. OANZ is working very hard for you. Thank you. I'll take any questions. If I can help you in any way, let's go.
So just very quickly, maybe before we go to questions, there's a couple sitting here. You talked about a royal commission.
Yeah.
Do you want to just explore how that might come about? Because we do have members who's asked, you know, we could, but that needs a whole election cycle.
Well, yeah. Most importantly, the government would have to call one, and this is a government bill, so it isn't happening, guys. Yeah. Might happen if you get a Labour-led coalition, but the difficulty with history in New Zealand is that political history shows that we usually give governments 2 terms. So look, you know, I mean, I would be surprised if they don't get 2 terms, but you know, you don't know. All I'm saying is that people are saying to me, oh, these guys might be a 1-term government, and I say, people always say that to me, and it's because that's what they hope. But, you know, you need to plan on the fact that these people will be in for at least 2 terms. And if that's the case, the question is, how's your sector going to look in 2 terms' time? That's 4.5 years from now. You know, and can you survive this bill, really? That's all I feel as if I'm aiming so low. For a woman who went to Harvard and topped my law school, I'm aiming so low. I'm just trying to get enough things through so that you guys can survive. That's all I'm trying to do, because if we can get that, then frankly, we walk on water. Okay, that will be incredible. And I just need you to know that now. So we've called in all favours. That's what we're doing, because now's the time.
Yeah. So there is a question here, which actually leads on to that one, is, and it's from Tracy, is why do we not accept that it is possible for the bill to be voted on its second reading out? Like, why, you know? Yes,
there's only one thing you need to know about what I do for a living, and that is I need to learn to count. So the last time I counted, we had a coalition government. They have a majority, And the coalition agreements that they signed means that it's even more than confidence in supply. They vote together. So that's why we are very fortunate. New Zealand First shares some of the concerns that you share, and they've been very sympathetic. So in receiving the amendments that may be needed. So remember, we're outside the tent, they're inside the tent, but they sat round a cabinet table, and there's only one principle here you need to inculcate, and that is cabinet collective responsibility. If we don't hang together, we will assuredly hang apart. I'm not sure who said that. Maybe it was Baggett. But all I'm saying to you is that they voted for this bill and its policy to be introduced. They are required to vote with it. However, that doesn't stop them championing the need for some tinkering around the edges. It's just that what we'd really like is the whole thing stopped, and what we'd really like is for it to be cut in half so that it can't be released, and we'd like a whole pile of things. Well, dreams are free, but in the world I live in, I'm just trying to get some technical amendments that won't destroy the organics industry. That's what I'm trying to do.
This is reading like a script, because we've got Alistair here, who's on the board of OANZ, saying, well, okay, so for the sake of everybody, because remember, this is for an information session for the OANZ membership, and it's another question to you, Mai, and it's around, so he says, the principal task of the OANZ submission is to sort of carve out this outdoor use from the bill, correct?
No, and I'm very happy if Scott wants to do that. But once Scott's done that, I'm going to talk about the 4 changes that I think are needed for this industry not to be destroyed. And I'm going to say that these are an absolute bottom line. So I'm going to say that Scott Lawson is amazing and it's wonderful, but I've been asked to speak on these and I will speak to them. The reason is because I don't believe you're going to be able to achieve that. So my job for you is to get what I can get.
Thank you. And there's one from Philippa here. She's with Soil and Health Association. She wants some clarification. Is the bill intended to remove all parts of the Has No Act that pertain to GE and GMOs?
No, it's not. It's not. I'm so sorry. It's not half as clear as that. I think the overlap with Has No is really, really disastrous, actually. Let me give you an example. So, wet tea towel around head time. So in terms of civil liability, after the bill is enacted and comes into force, some new GMOs and gene technology will be regulated under both the bill and Has No. However, some will only be regulated under the bill if they fall outside the new definition of new organism and Has No as amended by the bill. And the amendment says this, wet tea towel, Clause 2A4, to avoid doubt, if an organism is not a new organism, it does not become a new organism solely because it is a regulated organism under the Gene Technology Act 2024. That actually means the bill, it's just the way it was drafted. So what I'm saying to you, Philippa, is that it's really that what you should do is all of the pieces of legislation should fit together seamlessly. So everything is covered, and here there are gaps. And all that means is that no one's going to be clear about what they mean. And that means that ultimately you could be taken to court, okay? Or the court will need to clarify them. Now, what do I think about litigation? Well, I have the utmost respect for judges. I don't know how they do their job. It's so hard. But litigation is slow, it's expensive, and it's very uncertain.
Right. Karen,
Right.
Karen
now I've cleared you all up.
Yeah. So it's
Oh, and now for the bad news. That was the good news. Sorry.
Thanks for the good news, mate. But Karen's a past regional councillor, so she's got a question around the RMA. Is there anything in the RMA or LGA that could work in our favour in the future?
No, because the bill says that in clauses 246 to 254 that the bill will remove the ability of regional councils and territorial authorities to treat GMOs differently than other organisms, and therefore mean they are unable to apply limits and restrictions to the outdoor release of GMOs in their regional and district plans. The bill goes further to state that existing regional and district plans that already include such provision, to the extent that they breach these new requirements in the bill, are treated as void and must be amended as soon as possible. So I'm so sorry, but you've got 2 problems. First of all, you've got that problem, And I think the chances of getting rid of that is going to be very low. But I put it in because it's designed to be a shag on a rock to say, look, guys, you can't put all of the coexistent measures on the organics industry. If you're going to get rid of that, then you have to put something else in its place. That's the first problem. There is a second problem. The government is currently amending the Resource Management Act, and they are going to introduce that bill before the end of the year. The reason is because I spoke to the officials who are being ridden to death to get this done, and Chris Bishop is determined to do it, and it will be done this year. It will be introduced, and I think he is desperate to get it passed, so that means some sort of urgency next year. Okay, so I think that in terms of certainty, uncertainty, I mean, it's going to be a field day for lawyers. It really is, because no one's going to be clear about what anything means. All of this law reform is going to be done, and then it's going to get dumped on our laps, and then it's going to come into effect. And it's not just the primary legislation. You're then going to have regulations plus standards. But it's not just in that legislation, it's in all legislation. So that means that actually, in terms of the rule of law, you won't be able to understand the law by just reading it. You're going to have to come to people like Marcus and say, Marcus, what does this mean? And then Marcus will need to put a wet tea towel on his head, and he will need to say, I went to the temple this morning and the gods told me that it means 42. You will need to get the advice. That's the problem.
Marcus, you've got to get a job as an oracle there, so it might be like a bit like that. But May, it does, one of the 10 is not the Organic Products and Production Act of the affected
no,
so
no.
That's, yeah, why is that?
Yeah. I think it's because they don't really talk about coexistence, and I think you've got some sort of schema over here. The only problem is that what I've said to them is, okay, so I know that the entire organic sector does traceability, upstream, downstream. We all know, we all have to report, but don't we need the other guys to do it as well? Because otherwise we're not going to be able to hold our certification if it gets contaminated, but we don't know where it comes from.
Yeah,
we then can't contain it. And most importantly, if the Wilkins farm is completely destroyed because some idiot let something go, but we don't know where it comes from, where are they going to get compensation from? At the moment, there are only criminal provisions that say that you can get put in jail and that you will have to pay the Crown coffers a fine. Well, we don't care. None of that comes to us. You might put X away. Well, generally what will happen is there'll be companies. So maybe it's just a cost of business. They get prosecuted. It happens a lot, really seriously, mate. Yes, well, I'm talking to some big players here. A lot of regulation is just a cost of business, So, yeah, that's the problem.
Yeah, and this is another good little segue across here. Another question: is there any act that protects non-GMO businesses or trade with GE contamination, like a pesticide drift? There's nothing in there, right? Because if there's pesticide drift, there is recourse on the polluter.
Right. So don't ask me questions about the current legislation, because it could be that the current legislation, i.e. other acts not related to the bill, already provides for that. That would probably require me to have a good look through the HASNO bill. You have to understand that under HASNO there are provisions. There are strict liability provisions. So if you look at section 124 capital G of the HASNO Act, this is what it says on civil liability. A person is liable in damages for any loss or damage caused by any act or omission of the person while developing, field testing, importing or releasing a new organism in breach of this act, or possessing or disposing of any new organism imported, developed or released in breach of this act, or failing to comply with the controls relating to a new organism. I mean, don't those provisions sound yummy and really sensible? Why can't we just extend them? I mean, I'm not asking bigger than Ben-Hur. Call it whatever you like. They can call it a technical amendment, but we just need to make sure that those provisions are available to you. Okay? Right. Cut the lawyers out, because when I look at this, I just think maybe I should retire from everything else and just become an expert in this area. I tell you, this will be a lawyer's field day. It will be, and the regulator will be sued a lot. Yeah.
Right. There's a question here from Jenny. I'm just skipping through a few. I'm conscious of the time. Certain techniques will be exempted. How can we get them all under regulation? Says Jenny. It's a question.
Well, plan A would be to get rid of the exemption powers. Good luck. That won't happen. plan B is to make sure that in the exercise of the exemption powers, the exemption power is constrained so that things aren't exempted if they're going to be super dangerous. Now, there are already preconditions for an exemption, which make it appear as if they can't do it if there's more than a minimal risk. But you see, what does that mean? And that means that when it happens, and if it hurts you, you're going to have to get it tested in court, because you're going to say, hey, you gave them an exemption, and now they're releasing all this stuff, and it's more than a minimal risk. And the minister's going to say, no, they're not. Now, there's only one difference between you and the minister. The minister gets Crown-funded lawyers. They're called Crown Law. You have to pay for your own lawyers. Okay? So it's what I do every day, and my clients never have enough money. So you know, I always end up as David and Goliath. Generally, I'm with David, and every now and then I'm with Goliath. I must say, it's very nice when you're acting for Goliath. They have lots of resourcing and lots of manpower. When I act for David, generally we get very, very clever and tactical and strategic, and we do guerrilla warfare. But that's the problem.
We don't mind that. We're used to that, Mai.
So, really? Yeah.
It is tiring. It is tiring. And so there's another one here from Alistair around, are there any prospects for pushback by establishing legal precedents in the courts?
No, well, yes, but you'd have to establish them. So some poor bastard is going to have to bring the court cases and fund them. And the difficulty is that if you're up against Company X and they stand to make 100 million out of it, they're going to resource it accordingly. That's what they're going to do. So they're going to put 6 lawyers on it, and they're going to have every best expert witness from around the world. And who are you? The difficulty I find in acting for David is that nobody wants to be our expert witness, because they piss the other side off and then they never get to eat again. So my difficulty is always securing my witnesses, because they say, and who are you suing? And when you mention a government department's involved or is being joined, they don't like that. Or if you mention a very big company, all of a sudden they become conflicted and they don't want to act for you. So anyway, we've been there. We've done that before. All I'm saying is that the pathway we're now on is not an easy pathway. But if we don't fix the bill, it will become an impossible pathway. That's all. And the good thing is that I think New Zealand First is aware of that. And we have a new minister. And you know, Dr. Shane Reddy is a very fine man. But it's difficult. He came to the party late. I came to the party late. He and I both came to the party late. But the aim is to try and do something at this late stage. It's difficult to do, because, you know, his officials want the bill to stay the same, at least work for them. Oh, look, I'm sure his officials are all acting in the best interests of the country. It's just there's a great deal of work to do in a very short space of time, and it's always very difficult when it's moved from the policy making stage, the cabinet making process, and we're into Parliament. It just limits what you can do.
Thank you, Mai. Hey, Marcus, have you been listening to this and probably reflecting on the mountain of work? Do you have a comment in terms of where you, just listening to Mai and the types of questions coming from the community, what your thoughts are?
Well, I think I know, Senator, but you see me nodding about the how
you've got some feedback coming through, Marcus. You might have to put your headset back on.
Put my headset back on. Is it still getting feedback?
Because we've got a loop happening. I'll come back to you if you go on mute. Scott, is there anything from an OANZ perspective that you've heard in that discourse that you'd like to comment on?
No, I think there may be. I think there was one question from somebody questioning our submission that we'd put in. It's always going to be aging as we submit it. Time moves on from that. We will be revising our position with the advice of Mai and Marcus and others when we go to the select committee. So I think the question was from Alistair, possibly originally, about field release. We would love to get field releases removed from the bill. The answer to that is going to be really difficult. We'll keep asking for it. The Meat Industry Association, Seed and Grain Association, many others are asking for the same thing. Horticulture New Zealand's concerned about it as well too. Field releases are a major risk to us. We'll be asking, but on the advice from what May has alluded to, it's going to go through how we and we need to then take a step back and then look for labelling, traceability, and liability. And that's the key things we need. And our conventional friends, I mentioned, Dairy, NZ, Beef and Lamb, Meat Industry Association, just name a few, are all asking for the same thing. Trace it, record it, make somebody liable. So we're not on our own with that request. I hope that answers some of the questions.
Thank you. Marcus, do you want to come back in?
Yeah. Is that better?
Much better, thank you.
Okay, right. Sorry about the headphones. I just reiterate May's comments. You saw me nodding my head around how difficult, costly, and taxing litigation is. It's not the answer. And I think just looking at the comments and having talked to people, I hope that May's explanation enables you to go and talk to some of your GMO friends. There's often a sort of, oh, well, surely there's a legal remedy. And well, yes, there sometimes is a legal remedy, but it's not a practical remedy. And May's alluded to some of the other issues around the players who are on the other side of the fence. They have enormous resources. They're backed by venture capital, and where you're going to constantly be fighting a rearguard action. So, I keep saying to people, talk to your member of parliament, talk to your friends. Don't think this is someone else's problem, particularly in those of you who are parts of rural communities. This has the potential to have significant adverse impacts on rural communities, because it's not just organics, it's non-GMO as well. And those points about the lack of traceability, containment, compensation, those are the messages you need to get out there, that really we're being left hanging in the breeze as primary producers. I don't think it's intentional. It's just the way things are happening. Although Brendan would tell you that MB would say it is intentional in terms of organics being lumbered with all the costs of this. And I mean, the point would be made, and others have made it, that as an organics producer, if all of the premium that you earn as an organics producer, which doesn't necessarily take you past conventional production, if all of that's going to be absorbed in compliance and trying to mitigate your risk and all the rest of it, then you might as well just farm conventionally and we'll just carry on putting chemicals and herbicides into the environment. So yeah.
And thanks, Marcus. May, there's quite an interesting question here. And we are running out of time. And so, look, everyone, if I haven't answered all the questions here, I've been trying to sort of balance them up. But there is one here around precaution at local, national level. Of course, we're not just talking about farmers and farms, but there's a cost to the public and ratepayers. And how do we challenge socialised risk?
Well, there is a way to do it. But once again, if you're going through the courts, I think that's really difficult. There's local government elections next year, but this year, but they're not the ones who are doing this. They're subject to it as well. I mean, there are elections next year. Obviously, the government would like you to vote for them. It's just, there's an entire public law toolbox that you can use. But the question is, how much does it cost? What are the chances of succeeding? I think plan A has to be that we just get the bill as good as we can get it. And then the second thing is you just have to get the regulations so that they're workable and there are no gaps in them. You have to fix the standards so that it's as good as it can be. There will be test cases. The only question is, how many can you resource? Because actually under the Act, even if you are not the applicant for a license, you can nevertheless challenge. But how many applications can OANZ fund? Because at the end of the day, you'll be bearing all the other costs if we can't fix some of these gaps in the bill. And so we just need to be very real about what we're facing. That's really the difficulty. Of course, you can do all of these things, but I just say prevention's better than the cure. The difficulty is it's a bit difficult now. The baby's on the way. It is going to be born. We can't stop the pregnancy, and we can't stop. I think this analogy's gone far enough, but you can see what I mean.
Yeah.
We already have a pregnancy. The baby is going to arrive, and so it doesn't. As my midwife said to me, "Well, mate, the baby's not going back up. So shall we just push and get it out?" So it is going to come out, guys, and so we just need to think now about what we can best do. And frankly, Brendan, at this point, you just have to focus on trying to get that bill amended. So it is important that the politicians do know that this matters, and that the organic sector is not a small sector. There's lots of jobs, lots of export dollars, lots of money that goes into the economy. So you do need to be just a little bit noisy and letting your member of parliament know that. Yeah. Ooh.
Yeah, so just to conclude, and I know there's a few people disappointed they haven't had their questions answered.
Oh, it's okay. If you want to send me the question, I can try and send a quick
Cool.
response.
So if that's, thank you, May, for that. So in regards to that, if people have questions they don't feel have been answered today, because we do, there's a promise to wrap up at 5 and it's 4:59, put them in the chat. Lou will collect them and then we'll pass them on and try to get them back to everybody in that. And look, May, it was a great finish up. I'd like to thank everybody. Marcus, Scott, I'm going to give you the final closeout as the OANZ board member here. But thank you very much, Marcus and May and Lou, for helping in, driving us from behind the scenes on this. Thanks for all those who attended. It's really good to feel that spirit. Now, we're starting to be heard tomorrow on the 5th, and then we've got a whole crew on the 10th. And then, of course, May and Scott are on the 12th to the full committee, and that's going to be a critical moment. Scott, do you want to close us out, please, on behalf of the OANZ board?
Thanks, Brendan, and thanks to the fellow panelists as well, too, for your inputs. There's a lot of in-kind going on. Really appreciate that. There's a lot of late hours, early mornings, a lot of brain power going to this, a lot of wet towel moments, as May's alluded to. And we're only just getting started. So that's one thing I'd like to say. This is just getting going. We're going to be prepared to fight this for many years going forward. This is not just a select committee presentation. It's not just ticking the box. We're going to continue to need to fight this and to keep our industry at the forefront of premium food production in New Zealand. And we're going to need to resource this long term, and we're going to need to concede. And I think May's alluded to that at times. We've pushed the barrow out a long way asking for certain things. We're going to need to give some to get some back as well, to get some practicality into what we want. One thing we're asking for is OANZ is pleading for help in the funding of this, not just now, but in the future going forward as well too. Otherwise, it's going to be a burden on the ratepayers and the premium food producers of New Zealand. We are going to lose value, even though our government, coalition government, is determined to grow value. I think, as take a block from the west wall to put into the east wall analogy, we're going to need, it's a long fight. We need to get drawn out. We need to get more people involved. And thank you to everybody for today. And we've gone over time, and I apologise for that. But on behalf of OANZ, thank you for joining us today.
Excellent, Scott. Bye-bye, everybody, and enjoy the rest of the afternoon. Bye now.